that it will be as vibrant and as inspiring as that time. Now we, who's we, that is the SPSP committee, which are Rachel Elkin, Marcel Baumans, Hasok Chang, Henk de Recht, Margaret Morrison, Nancy Narcessian, and myself. One of the ideas behind founding the SPSP was to form a community for those who take approaches to the philosophy of science that have not been incorporated in mainstream philosophy of science. Introduce Hasok Chang to you. 2 years ago, Hasok Chang gave a memorable keynote address during that famous conference, the Philosophical Perspectives on Scientific Understanding Conference. And the title was Ontological Principles and the Intelligibility of...
It's a great pleasure to be here. I don't think I've ever had before an opportunity to address a crowd with so many people from so many places whose work I admire and love. So I hope I live up to the audience. This talk is going to be sketchy and programmatic. It's much too general and abstract for my own taste, but I think that's what we need on this occasion. I'm probably not going to say anything you don't already know, but I'm going to provide a fresh perspective, which I hope you're going to find illuminating. Okay, enough apologetics, let me begin. So that's the plan for the talk, and the question I start with is, why do we need a new philosophy of scientific practice? I'll begin by citing an expression of discontent from a scientist who says, almost all description of science by social scientists and historians and philosophers are seen by practicing scientists as strange, or as missing the point, or as demeaningly ironic. This is from Martin Krieger, a physicist highly sympathetic to and well informed about science studies. So if that's what we get from the likes of Krieger, we can imagine responses from more typical scientists. Actually, we don't have to imagine, we know. And on the other side, I imagine most of you have had the experience of exasperation with philosophical colleagues, lost in their idealized abstractions and toy examples, whose work makes you want to scream, how is that philosophy of science? Even many philosophers deeply concerned about scientific practice have tended to use rather haphazard or limited frameworks for description and analysis. For example, in his 1992 paper, The Self-Vindication of the Laboratory Sciences, Ian Hacking, the great Ian Hacking, lists 15 elements of experimental practice. Here they are. These elements are just written out to you. Questions, background knowledge, systematic theory, topical hypothesis, modeling of the apparatus under the heading of ideas. Then we have things, target, source of modification, detectors, tools, data generators. And then we have marks and the manipulation of marks, data assessment, reduction, analysis, interpretation.
Thank you, Hasok, for that very nice introduction, and thank you to the conference organizers for inviting me to this, which has been a really inspiring conference. It's really been a privilege to be here. I have a slight nervousness about giving the last paper, because though I think science in practice is what I try to talk about it, I'll talk a little bit about problems I've been interested in for a very long time, just thinking about natural hierarchies, but particularly in this case of today, in the context of thinking about the relation between cooperation and self-interest, or about the conflict between these two, moving through that to how this applies to thinking about human individuals. I'll then summarize some of my recent thoughts about biological individuality much more generally, and in conclusion I'll come back to how that might clarify some of our thinking about human individuals. So, to start off, just this general problem, a very familiar thought that we see subcellular organelles in between molecules and cells, organs, and then you could perhaps move on to ecological groups, Gaia, however far you want to take it. The question that I'm interested in is trying to think about whether, as you move up this hierarchy, the higher level individuals are simply to be thought of as sort of consortia of lower level individuals temporarily cooperating to serve their immediate and, as is sometimes said, as more selfish interests, or whether they somehow constitute wholes that have as much claim to reality as the individuals with which they're composed. So there's obviously a background question, and this again is something that I can't possibly do justice to in this talk, is what constitutes a whole as an individual, but I hope that I can at least give some kind of pointers to ways one might think about that. Hasok has here slightly stolen my but there is this familiar quote from Margaret Thatcher, which I shall deny. But of course, I just wanted to point out on this slide that this does capture an idea that even great thinkers than Mrs. Thatcher have occasionally been drawn towards, that human individuals are the sort of top of a hierarchy in the sense that they're not really top, they're bigger. And this is expressed by the idea that really, ultimately, they're self-interested, selfish. And then, of course, against the obvious kind of remark that people aren't always nasty all the time,
First, to all of you, the participants, especially those of you who've come so far. Australia, Argentina, Korea, as well as the US and Canada, and the rest of you from continental Europe and the UK. It's wonderful to have people show up when you make something up. It's like when you organize a party and you think, oh, what if nobody comes? And we've just been really pleased by all of you being here and giving such wonderful talks. We there is the SPSP committee, who, I mean, if I can do it,